What happens when the man you gave up everything for throws you away like trash? For 10 years, Audrey Hale sacrificed her dreams, her career, and her future to build her husband's. Her reward: he called her a burden and left her for a life of luxury, saddling her with a secret crushing debt that threatened to destroy her. Forced to work as a barista, Audrey had nothing left but the sketches on her napkins. Until those sketches were seen by the one man who didn't just see a broken woman. He saw the architect of the future. This is the story of how a woman discarded as a burden became the one person a billionaire would build the entire world for. The sound of Mark's key in the lock was heavier than usual. It was 8:00 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the drizzling rain against their Brooklyn Heights window was the only sound in the apartment save for the simmering pot of risotto Audrey had been tending for an hour. She had given up her own ambitions, her coveted spot at the Cooper Union for architecture to support his. 10 years of her life had been poured into him, funding his MBA, rubbing his shoulders after 100-hour work weeks at the junior analyst desk, and believing in his dream of launching a fintech startup. Mark Davis walked in, not with the usual weary slump, but with a rigid, cold posture. He was wearing a new suit, a deep charcoal gray from Savile Row, one she knew they couldn't afford. He didn't toss his briefcase by the door. He placed it gently as if it contained something sacred. "Mark, you're late. The risotto is—" "Don't worry about it, Audrey," he said, walking past her. He didn't kiss her. He didn't even look at her. He went straight to the modest bar cart and poured himself 3 fingers of their best scotch, the bottle they were saving. "What's wrong?" Audrey asked, wiping her hands on her apron, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. "Did the pitch meeting go badly?" He let out a short, dry laugh. "The pitch meeting, oh no. The pitch meeting went perfectly. The seed round is closed. We're funded. 20 million. A wave of relief should have hit her, but it didn't. The ice in her stomach just got colder. "Mark, that's everything we've worked for. Why do you look so miserable?" He took a long sip of the scotch, turning to face her. His eyes, once warm, were now flat like polished stones. "We haven't worked for it, Audrey. I have. You've been here." "Here?" She repeated the word, catching in her throat. "I've been working 2 jobs to keep this roof over our heads while you built your pitch deck. I've been coding your website's front end because we couldn't afford a developer. You've been a distraction," he cut in, his voice precise and cruel. "I've been networking, Audrey. I've been dining at Per Se. I've been on weekend trips to the Hamptons with venture capitalists. I'm entering a new world, and that world requires a different kind of partner." Audrey felt the floor tilt. "What are you talking about? A different kind? Mark, what did you do?" "I did what was necessary," he said, setting the glass down. He walked to the bedroom and returned with a packed suitcase. A new leather Toomey suitcase. "You're leaving," she whispered. The risotto began to scorch on the stove, but she couldn't move. "I'm moving on," he corrected. "The new investors, they like a certain image. Chloe Vanderbilt, she's the daughter of our lead investor. She understands that world. She's part of it. You're still the girl from Queens who thinks a big night out is splitting a pizza." Each word was a physical blow. "So, that's it. 10 years. 10 years of my life, my sacrificed career. It's just over. Because I'm not a Vanderbilt." Mark sighed, the sound of profound impatience. He picked up his briefcase and the Toomey bag. He paused at the door, and this was the moment that would be burned into her memory forever. He looked back not with sadness or guilt, but with a look of genuine, exhausted pity. "Look, Audrey, I just can't carry you anymore. I'm about to be a very big deal. I need someone who can keep up, not someone I have to drag behind me." He adjusted the grip on his bag. "You've become a burden, and I'm done carrying it." He opened the door. "The divorce papers will be sent to you," he said. "My lawyer will handle everything. It's better this way. You'll be happier, with your own kind." The door clicked shut. The lock turned. The silence that filled the apartment was absolute, broken only by the hiss and pop of the burning risotto on the stove. Audrey sank to the kitchen floor, the smell of burnt arborio rice filling her lungs. He hadn't just left her. He had defined her. A burden. The first week was a blur of disbelief. The second was a tidal wave of logistics. Mark, it turned out, had been meticulous. The divorce papers that arrived via courier were simple, non-negotiable. He was being generous, his lawyer, a shark from the firm of Skadden Arps, wrote. He wouldn't contest her keeping the apartment, an apartment her inheritance from her grandmother had provided the down payment for. Audrey and her best friend Sarah Jenkins, a tough-as-nails paralegal, sat at the scarred wooden table sorting through the papers. "This is too easy, Aud," Sarah said, her brow furrowed. "A guy like Mark, who just called you a burden, he doesn't just walk away and leave you the primary asset. There's a catch." The catch arrived 3 days later. It didn't come in a sleek envelope from a law firm. It came in a flurry of angry red envelopes from half a dozen different banks and private lenders. They were collection notices. "What is this?" Audrey asked, her hands shaking as she opened the first one. "Sovereign Trust, past due $150,000. "It's a mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. The next envelope was from a different lender. And the next. Sarah spread them across the table. They weren't just business loans. They were high-interest, short-term personal loans. The kind you get when you're desperate. "Audrey," Sarah said, her voice pale, "look at the primary signatory on these." Audrey's eyes scanned the fine print. Her vision tunneled. Her name, Audrey Hale. Her social security number. Her signature. I never signed these," she stammered. "I would never." "He forged them," Sarah whispered, her face hardening. "That bastard. He didn't get his $20 million seed round. He got rejected. He's been funding his startup, his suits, his dinners at Per Se, his trips to the Hamptons with personal loans. In your name." The promotion was a lie. The new world was a fantasy. The $20 million seed round wasn't for his company. It was Chloe Vanderbilt's father's investment, and the price of entry was apparently Audrey's exit. Mark hadn't just left her. He had systematically hollowed out her entire financial existence. The generosity of him leaving her the apartment was a final cruel joke. The loans totaled over $700,000. They were all secured against the apartment's equity. He hadn't left her the apartment. He had left her a prison of debt. Within a month, the foreclosure notices started. Audrey was powerless. Mark had vanished, his phone disconnected. His new company, Davis FinTech Solutions, was nothing but a ghost website. Chloe Vanderbilt's father's firm issued a statement that they had no current business relationship with Mr. Davis. He had used his new relationship to secure his exit, leaving Audrey to face the fallout. She had to sell. The sale of the Brooklyn Heights apartment, her home for a decade, was a bloodbath. After the banks, the lenders, and the legal fees, Audrey walked away with $4,200 and 2 suitcases. She moved into a 300-square-foot studio in Astoria, Queens, with peeling paint and a radiator that hissed like a snake. The shame was a physical weight. She was 34 years old, a college dropout, bankrupt, and divorced. Mark's word echoed in her head. Burden. He hadn't just called her a burden, he had made her one. She needed a job, any job. Her architecture portfolio was a decade old. Her coding skills were for a defunct website. She scrolled through listings until her eyes burned. Finally, she found one. Barista, Aperture Coffee, Midtown Manhattan. Early mornings required. It was a high-end minimalist coffee shop frequented by the very finance and tech titans Mark had so desperately wanted to be. The irony was bitter, but the rent was due. Audrey Hale, the woman who once designed homes, was now serving coffee to the people who lived in them. She learned to steam milk, to pull the perfect espresso shot, to smile and say, "Have a great day," to men in $5,000 suits who looked right through her never knowing the woman pouring their coffee was drowning in a debt created by one of their own. Aperture Coffee was a symphony of beige and brushed steel. It prided itself on its single-origin experience and its silent, upwardly mobile clientele. For Audrey, it was a 6-month-long humiliation starting with a 4:30 a.m. alarm. She was efficient, quiet, and invisible, which was exactly how she wanted it. Her only solace came in the lulls between the 8:00 a.m. rush and the 11:00 a.m. lunch crowd. She would stand behind the marble counter, a black Sharpie in hand, and sketch on the thick cream-colored napkins. She didn't sketch people, she sketched structures. The way the morning light hit the steel of the building across the street, and how a different angle would maximize passive heating. A cantilevered balcony for a micro-apartment. A design for a community center with a green roof and rainwater reclamation system. Her mind, dormant for a decade, was finally working again, churning out ideas with a desperate, hungry energy. There was one regular she found. Interesting. Most customers barked their orders while scrolling on their phones. This man was different. He was tall, with a sharp suit, not flashy like Mark's, but impeccably tailored. He looked to be in his late 30s, with intense, analytical eyes and a quiet gravity. He never spoke on the phone. He just observed. His order was always the same and always precise. A long black 190 degrees, and a separate single shot of steamed oat milk 140 degrees. The other baristas found him intimidating. Audrey found his precision calming. For 2 minutes every day at 8:15 a.m. she focused on getting it exactly right. He'd nod pay always with the same sleek black metal card and take a seat at the window, where he would read not from a tablet, but from physical-bound reports. One rainy Tuesday, 6 months into her tenure, the shop was empty. Audrey was lost in a design sketching on a napkin with a ferocity that blocked out the world. It was a problem she'd been working on for weeks, a modular zero-carbon housing unit for displaced populations. She was so focused on the joint system for the interlocking panels that she didn't hear the door chime. She didn't see the man approach the counter. He stood there for a full minute watching her pen fly. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low baritone. "That's an inefficient use of tensile space. The load-bearing columns on the western exposure won't support the atrium you've designed if you're using reclaimed timber." Audrey jumped the pen, skittering across the napkin. She looked up mortified into the intense eyes of her 8:15 a.m. regular. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't see you. Your usual." He ignored her, his gaze locked on the napkin. "You're sacrificing structural integrity for aesthetics. If you used a steel frame exoskeleton and non-load-bearing interior walls, you could keep the atrium and the passive heating element. But the joinery here," he pointed with a long finger, "is all wrong. You're creating a sheer point." Audrey, who had been flushing with embarrassment, suddenly felt a spark of her old self. The architect. "It's not reclaimed timber," she said, her voice firmer. "It's glulam cross-laminated glued timber. The tensile strength is comparable to steel at a fraction of the weight and carbon cost. The joinery is a mortise and tenon but reinforced. It wouldn't shear. It would distribute the load." The man's eyebrows lifted. A flicker of something crossed his face. Respect. "Glulam," he mused. "But the R value in a high-humidity environment like you've implied with the rainwater collectors. The cost of sealing it would be astronomical. It's not scalable." "Only if you use a chemical sealant," Audrey countered, forgetting she was a barista. "But if you use the yakisugi method, charring the surface, it becomes waterproof, fire-resistant, and insect-proof for 50 years. The cost is front-loaded, but the long-term maintenance is almost zero." The man was silent. He stared at her, really stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. The invisible barista was suddenly jarringly visible. "Who are you?" he asked. Audrey's face fell. The spark was gone. She was just a woman in a black apron. "I'm Audrey. Your coffee. I'm sorry." She turned to the machine, her hands shaking, but he put his hand on the counter. "No, His phone, which he'd set on the counter, buzzed. He glanced at it and a mask of annoyance crossed his face. "I have to take this. My coffee. Please." He stepped away, his back to her, and answered the phone. "Harrison, tell the board I'll be there in 10. And get the schematics for the Singapore project, the real ones, not the press release. I want to know why we're over budget." Audrey prepared the long black and the steamed oat milk, her heart hammering. He finished his call, took the coffee with a curt nod, and left. He was gone for a full minute before she realized he'd left his phone. The sleek black metal phone. She picked it up, intending to run after him, but the screen lit up with a notification. A calendar reminder. 10:00 a.m. Ethelred Dynamics. Board meeting. And beneath it the lock screen's wallpaper. It wasn't a person. It was a breathtaking digital render of a futuristic green city. And in the corner a name. Elias Thorne. Audrey's blood ran cold. Elias Thorne, the god of Silicon Valley. The reclusive trillion-dollar tech billionaire who had pivoted from software to sustainable cities. The founder and CEO of Ethelred Dynamics. The man building the future. And she had just argued with him about glulam timber. He came back 3 hours later. The lunch rush was in full swing, and Audrey was manning the register, her mind a million miles away. The black phone felt like a bomb in her apron pocket. The line parted as he walked in. This time people recognized him. There were whispers, the subtle clicks of phone cameras. He ignored them all and walked straight to Audrey. "I believe you have my phone," he said, his voice low. "Yes, Mr. Thorne. I didn't mean to look at the screen, it just lit up." She fumbled in her pocket and handed it to him. "I'm aware," he said, pocketing it. "You're Audrey Hale." It wasn't a question. He had clearly spent the last 3 hours finding out exactly who she was. He knew. He knew she was a Cooper Union dropout. He knew she was divorced from Mark Davis. He probably knew about the debt. The shame was so acute she felt physically ill. "I am," she said, bracing herself for, she didn't know what, pity dismissal. Elias Thorne did neither. He looked at the counter, then at her. "You were right about the Yakisugi method. I had my team run the numbers. It's a 20% higher initial cost, but it amortizes over the build's lifespan. It's efficient." Good," she managed. "It's not just good," he said, his voice impatient. "It's brilliant. Which is why I don't understand why you are standing here serving $6 coffee." Audrey flinched. "My life got complicated, sir." "So I see," he said. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a simple heavy-stock business card. It just had his name and a number. "My company, Ethelred Dynamics, is launching the inaugural Ethelred Prize for Sustainable Urban Design. It's a $1 million grant and a contract to develop the winning concept. The application deadline is in 2 weeks. Your napkin sketch. It's more advanced than half the entries we've already received from world-renowned firms." He pushed the card across the counter. "Apply." Audrey stared at the card. I can't. I'm not a licensed architect. I don't have a firm. I'm a barista." "I don't care if you're a shepherd," Elias said, his eyes sharp. "I care about the design. The rules state it's open to any and all innovators. That's you. The deadline is November 15th. He started to turn away, then paused. He looked at the chaos of the lunch rush, at the manager yelling about foam, at Audrey's white-knuckled grip on a cleaning rag. "And in the meantime," he said as an afterthought, "my personal assistant, Mr. Harrison, is a tyrant. He's so terrifying his own assistants quit every other week. He needs an assistant. It pays substantially better than this, and it requires someone who can handle precise multi-step instructions under pressure." He gave a small, almost imperceptible glance at the espresso machine. "If you can get my coffee order right every day for 3 months without error," he said, "you can handle Mr. Harrison. My office is 3 blocks from here. Be there at 7 a.m. tomorrow if you want the job." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked out, leaving the entire coffee shop buzzing in his wake. Audrey looked at the business card. She looked at the line of impatient customers. She looked at the espresso machine. She had 2 weeks to complete the most important design of her life. And she had a 7 a.m. job interview with a billionaire's tyrant assistant. She untied her apron, tossed it on the counter, and walked out the door, ignoring her manager's shocked cry. For the first time in a year, she wasn't running from something. She was running toward it. The lobby of the Ethelred Dynamics headquarters in Hudson Yards was less of an office building and more of a cathedral to the future. A 50-foot living wall breathed oxygen into the air, and holographic models of green cities hovered in the atrium. Audrey, wearing the only decent blazer she owned, felt like a fraud. But the man she met, Mr. Harrison, was not what she expected. He was older, impeccably dressed, and had the calm, all-seeing gaze of a man who had survived decades of corporate warfare. He wasn't a yeller. He was worse. He was precise. "Mr. Thorne believes you are capable of this," Harrison said, his voice clipped. "I believe you are a barista. We are at an impasse. Your job is simple. You will manage my schedule, which manages his schedule. You will be the firewall between the world and me. The last assistant ordered Mr. Thorne a cappuccino. Do not be the last assistant." The job was brutal. It was 16-hour days. It was a deluge of information logistics and impossible demands. But Audrey thrived, handling the complex logistics of Elias Thorne's life, coordinating with 3 continents, chartering jets, formatting complex engineering reports was like architecture. It was about seeing the whole structure and making all the pieces fit. She was good at it. Mr. Harrison even gave her a curt nod of approval after her first week. Elias Thorne himself was a blur. He would sweep in and out, a force of nature, always on the phone, always solving a crisis. But he would pause sometimes by her desk. "How is the application coming?" he'd ask, not breaking stride. "It's coming," she'd reply. Every night she'd go home to her tiny Astoria studio, her feet aching, her brain fried, and she would work. She worked on her design, the Phoenix Project, she called it. A modular, scalable, self-sustaining community built from Yakisugi-treated glulam and powered by integrated solar glass panels. It was the best work she had ever done. She was 2 days from the deadline when the past walked back into her life. She was crossing the lobby carrying a stack of blueprints for the Singapore project when a familiar, dreaded voice called her name. "Audrey, my God! Audrey Hale!" She froze. She turned. There he was. Mark Davis. He looked different. His expensive suit was slightly rumpled. His power haircut was a little too long, but the arrogant smirk was firmly in place. "Mark," she said, her voice flat. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his eyes raking over her, taking in the Ethelred ID badge. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Don't tell me. You're the coffee girl here, too. I guess it's a step up." "I'm Mr. Harrison's executive assistant," she said, her chin high. "What are you doing here, Mark? I thought you'd be in the Caymans by now." His smirk wavered. "Things changed. Chloe and I, we're on a break. Look, Aud, I've been thinking. I was a fool. That whole thing, I was under a lot of pressure. What we had, it was real." He took a step closer. Audrey stood her ground. "You left me with $700,000 in fraudulent debt, Mark. What we had was a crime scene." He had the grace to look annoyed. "Technicalities. Listen, this is fate, you running into me. I'm here to pitch my startup. Elias Thorne. He's impossible to get a meeting with. They've got me in a cattle call with some junior VC. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You're on the inside. You work for his right-hand man. You could put in a good word. Get my deck on his desk. For old time's sake. Think of it. You and me together again. With Ethelred backing, we could have it all back." Audrey looked at him. The leech. The parasite. He hadn't changed at all. He didn't see her. He saw an angle, an opportunity, a tool. "I have to get these blueprints to Mr. Harrison." she said, her voice like ice. She stepped around him. His face contorted, the fake charm evaporating, revealing the raw, bitter man beneath. "Oh, I get it," he sneered, his voice loud enough for the security guard to look over. "You're sleeping with him, aren't you? That's how you got the job. You're Thorne's charity case." Audrey kept walking her back straight, her heels clicking on the marble. "You're still just a barista, Audrey," he yelled after her. "You're a burden, and you'll always be a burden. Don't you forget who you are." She didn't look back. She got in the elevator, and only when the polished steel doors slid shut did she allow her hands to shake. He was wrong. She knew exactly who she was. She went back to her desk, and with a steady hand clicked "Submit" on her Ethelred Prize application. The weeks that followed were a quiet storm. Audrey continued her work for Mr. Harrison, her efficiency becoming legendary. She had paid off a chunk of her debt with her new salary, and had even started a countersuit against Mark for fraud using a lawyer Sarah Jenkins had recommended. Elias Thorne never mentioned the prize. Audrey assumed her application had vanished into the digital ether with thousands of others. Then one Monday, Mr. Harrison called her into his office. "Congratulations, Ms. Hale," he said without a hint of a smile. "You are one of 5 finalists for the Ethelred Prize." Audrey's world stopped. "What?" "Your Phoenix project." The board was impressed. "The final presentation to the judges is in 2 weeks at the annual Ethelred Gala at the Lincoln Center. Mr. Thorne expects you to win." "Mr. Thorne does. He is recusing himself from the final vote, obviously," Harrison said. "But his note on your file was succinct. It said, 'Build this,' so I suggest you don't disappoint him." Audrey walked out in a daze. A finalist. She was a finalist. The news broke the next day in an official press release. And that was when Mark made his move. It started on a sleazy tech gossip blog called Bite Sheet. The headline was explosive: "Fixes in Elias Thorne's new assistant, a finalist in his own $1 million prize." The article was vicious. It painted Audrey as an unqualified and scorned ex-wife, a barista-turned-mistress. It cited anonymous sources who claimed her design had striking similarities to an obscure conceptual design by a small Belgian firm from 2018. It implied she was a talentless leech, and that the prize was a sham, a gift from a billionaire to his new girlfriend. Audrey was horrified. "It's not true. None of it," she told Elias, storming into his office, a rare breach of protocol. "The Belgian design? Yes, it's similar, but mine is structurally different. The joinery, the materials. I developed my concept years ago back in college." Elias Thorne's face was a mask of cold fury. He was reading the article on his monitor. "He's sourcing his information well. He knows about the Belgian firm. That's a deep cut. This isn't just Mark. He's got help." Chloe Vanderbilt. It had to be. Her family had the PR connections to plant a story like this. Mark was trying to destroy her reputation to cover his own failures. If he couldn't get in with Elias, he would burn Audrey's new life to the ground. "The board is panicking," Elias said, standing up. "The prize's integrity is on the line. They've called an emergency ethics hearing for you, tomorrow." "What do I do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You fight," Elias said, his voice hard. "I can't interfere. If I do, it proves their point. This is your battle, Audrey. Prove it's yours. Show them your work. All of it." The ethics hearing was a star chamber. 5 board members, the prize committee, and Ethelred's general counsel all staring at her from across a 30-foot mahogany table. "Ms. Hale," the lead board member, a severe woman named Patricia Lowell, began. "These are serious allegations. The Bite Sheet article. It's damaging. And the similarities to the Belgian project are concerning." "They're not just concerning," another board member muttered. "It's a clear case of plagiarism." Audrey's fear was replaced by a sudden cold anger. This was not Mark's. This was hers. "It's not plagiarism," Audrey said, her voice clear and strong. She walked to the front of the room and plugged her laptop into the projector. She didn't show them her final Phoenix Project render. Instead, she showed them a scanned image of a faded, coffee-stained notebook. "This is my senior thesis portfolio from Cooper Union, 2015, 10 years ago." She clicked to the next slide, a detailed sketch of a modular, self-sustaining community. The core concepts were all there: the glulam, the interlocking panels, the green roof. "And this," she clicked again, "is a photo of a napkin." A murmur went through the room. It was her sketch from Aperture Coffee, the one she'd been working on when Elias first spoke to her. She had saved it. "And this," she said, "is a timeline. My designs from 2015 to this year. And this is the Belgian project, which was published in 2018, 3 years after my initial thesis. Theirs is a beautiful concept, but it is structurally unviable. It's an art piece. Mine works." She spent the next hour walking them through the engineering, the material science, the Yakisugi method, the load-bearing calculations. She didn't just defend her design, she taught them why it was superior. When she finished, the room was silent. Patricia Lowell looked at her fellow board members. She then looked at Audrey, a new respect in her eyes. "Ms. Hale," she said, "thank you for clarifying. The Ethics Committee finds these allegations to be utterly without merit. Your place as a finalist is secure. Now, please tell us more about the thermal mass storage." Audrey had won. The David H. Koch Theater at Lincoln Center was a different universe. The Grand Promenade was a sea of black ties and couture gowns, a glittering, shimmering ocean of power. Light from the massive starburst chandeliers caught on millions of dollars in diamonds, and the air buzzed with the low, confident hum of the global elite. Investors, politicians, tech titans, and philanthropists. They were all here for the inaugural Ethelred Prize Gala. Audrey felt like a ghost haunting a palace. She clutched her small borrowed clutch, her knuckles white. Her dress, an elegant deep blue silk gown that Sarah had forced her to buy with her first paycheck, felt like a costume. A year ago she was wearing a stained black apron and smelling of burnt coffee beans, invisible to people just like these. Tonight she was one of them, a finalist. The imposter syndrome was so strong it was almost paralyzing. "You look terrified, Ms. Hale." Audrey jumped. Mr. Harrison, looking impossibly sharp in a classic tuxedo, was at her elbow, a flute of champagne in his hand. "It's a lot," Audrey admitted, gesturing to the crowd. "I feel like I should be taking their coats." "Nonsense," Harrison said, his tone firm. "You are here because your work is superior. Do not look at them as lions. Look at them as potential clients. Now stop hiding by the pillar. The presentations begin in 5 minutes." She was seated at a table near the front with the other 4 finalists. The tension was palpable. She sized up her competition. There was Dr. Lena Hansen from MIT, a severe woman with a brilliant, terrifyingly complex AI model for decentralized power grids. There was Javier Cortez, a charismatic biotech founder from Brazil, whose pitch for plastic-eating algae was so compelling he'd already received a standing ovation at a TED Talk. They were giants. Audrey was just Audrey. "And now our final finalist," the host, a famous news anchor, announced. A local New York innovator, Ms. Audrey Hale, presenting the Phoenix Project. A polite, almost subdued applause. She was the unknown, the wild card. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She walked toward the stage, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She passed the front table and her eyes met Elias Thorne's. He was watching her, his expression unreadable, intense. He wasn't with the other executives. He was sitting alone at his table, a single glass of water in front of him. As she passed, he gave her one singular definitive nod. It wasn't encouragement. It was a command win. Audrey took a deep breath, stood at the podium, and looked out at the sea of faces. "What is a home?" she began. her voice shaking only for a second before it solidified. "We talk a lot here about data, about carbon, about AI. But what about dignity? What about a place to be safe?" She clicked to her first slide. It wasn't a render. It was a picture of a burnt-out building in the Bronx. Our cities are full of people who have lost their homes. To fires, to floods, to financial ruin. We tell them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but we've taken their boots. She clicked again, her first napkin sketch. "I started this design not as an architect, but as someone who understood what it meant to be displaced. I was at a low point. I was told I was a burden." Her voice was quiet, but the microphone caught every word. The room, which had been rustling, went utterly still. "I began to think about that word, burden. What does it mean, a load, a weight? But what if the structures that carry us weren't seen as a cost, but as an investment?" She clicked to the next slide. A detailed schematic of her yakisugi glulam joinery. In Japan, there is an ancient technique called yakisugi. You take cedar wood and you char it. You set it on fire. You burn it until the surface is black and cracked. A murmur went through the crowd. "It seems destructive." Audrey continued, her voice gaining power. "It seems like you're ruining the material, but what you're actually doing is making it stronger. The fire, it makes the wood waterproof. It makes it fire retardant. It makes it insect-proof for decades. You're not destroying it. You're forging it." She clicked to the final breathtaking render of the Phoenix Project, its charred timber and glass facade glowing in the digital sunlight, green roofs, visible on every level. This is the Phoenix Project. Not just modular housing, it's a statement. It's a structure built from the idea that what has been burned can be rebuilt stronger. It's zero-carbon, self-sustaining, and scalable. It's not just a home, it's a fortress of dignity. Thank you. For a full 5 seconds there was absolute silence. Audrey's heart stopped. They hated it. It was too personal. Then a single person in the front row stood up. Elias Thorne. He didn't just clap. He applauded, his hands striking together with a deliberate, powerful rhythm. That one action broke the dam. The entire theater erupted. The applause was thunderous, a genuine rolling wave of approval. It was more than the others had received. It was an ovation. Shaking, Audrey walked off the stage. An hour later, after a tense dinner, the host was back at the podium. "The judges have deliberated. This was, they said, the most difficult decision of their careers. The innovation, the passion, it was extraordinary." Audrey was holding Sarah Jenkins' hand under the table, who had snuck over from the legal department's table. "Breathe, Aud," Sarah whispered. "The winner of the inaugural Ethelred Prize and the $1 million grant is Audrey Hale for the Phoenix Project." The world dissolved into a bright, roaring noise. Sarah was screaming in her ear. Mr. Harrison at the next table was on his feet, a smile of genuine, unfiltered pride on his face. Audrey couldn't move. She was frozen, tears blurring her vision. "Go on, Ms. Hale," Harrison said, appearing at her side. "You've earned this. Go." She stumbled to the stage, the crystal award feeling impossibly heavy in her hands. She looked out at the crowd, at Elias, who was still standing, his eyes locked on hers. I, she stammered, then laughed, wiping a tear. "A year ago I was serving coffee. I was sketching on napkins because I couldn't afford a notepad. I just want to say to anyone who feels like they've been discarded, you're not. You're just unforged. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for teaching me that precision is its own form of art. And thank you, Mr. Thorne. Thank you for seeing potential in a napkin." The reception afterward was a whirlwind. Audrey was no longer a ghost. She was the sun. A dozen people were crowded around her, shoving business cards into her hand. "Audrey Hale, Robert Kane, Deputy Mayor's Office. We need to talk about this for the downtown redevelopment." Ms. Hale, a word. I'm with the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. Your thoughts on scaling this for an arid climate? The Yakasugi concept was genius, Ms. Hale. Pure genius. I'm a construction magnate from Chicago. I have questions about the supply chain. She was answering them all. Confidently. She wasn't an imposter. She was an architect. She knew the answers. She knew the load-bearing capacity, the R values, the supply chain logistics. She was in her element, the queen of the ball. Look at you, Sarah whispered, handing her a fresh glass of champagne. You're a natural Aud. You're a shark now. No. Audrey smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time in years. I'm just an architect. And then the air chilled. The crowd around her parted, an invisible pressure pushing them back. Well, well. Bravo, Aud. Bravo. She froze. That voice. The smarmy, condescending tone she had heard in her nightmares. She turned. Mark Davis. He was standing there, a flute of champagne in his hand, his suit just a little too shiny, his hair slicked back. Beside him, draped in diamonds that looked like ice, was Chloe Vanderbilt. Her face was a mask of bored, aristocratic disdain. Mark, Audrey said, her voice turning to steel. You're not on the list. Chloe's father has a table. Mark sneered, gesturing to Chloe, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. It's amazing what you can do with a good sob story. Losing your home, at a low point, very dramatic. You played them perfectly. I'll give you that. The deputy mayor and the Chicago magnate exchanged uneasy glances. This was a scene. Don't be a pig, Mark, Chloe said, her voice like tinkling broken glass. She got lucky. A pity vote. The project is a pipe dream. It'll never get built. Mark ignored her, his eyes fixed on Audrey, a grotesque, calculating smile spreading across his face. He was desperate. This was his last chance. Listen, Aud, he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Congratulations. Seriously. That $1 million prize, that's a great start. But now you need to run a business. You need a partner. Someone who knows the market. My fintech startup. We can pivot. Think about it. Phoenix Capital. My business expertise, your design, your prize money. We could have it all back, for old time's sake. He was trying to get his hands on her prize money. After everything. After the debt, the fraud, the humiliation. He was standing here trying to leech off her again. Audrey looked at him, at his eager, greedy eyes, at his weak, cruel mouth. The fear was gone. The shame was gone. All that was left was a cold, pure, righteous anger. The last time I partnered with you, Mark, she said, her voice clear and cutting, I ended up in $700,000 of fraudulent debt and a barista's apron. Now get away from me. Mark's face contorted. The fake charm evaporated, revealing the raw, bitter failure beneath. He had failed to pitch Elias. He had failed to sabotage her. And now he had failed to get his hands on her money. He had nothing left but his cruelty. Oh, I get it, he said, his voice rising, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. The music in the room seemed to fade. You think you're better than me now, don't you? You think winning this toy makes you something? You're still just Audrey Hale, the girl from Queens. Mark, shut up. Chloe hissed, her face pale with fury and embarrassment. No, he yelled, pulling his arm away from her. She needs to hear this. They all need to see who you really are. He jabbed a finger at her. You think they respect you? They pity you. You're a charity case. You know I'm the one they should be thanking. If I hadn't dumped her, she'd still be in my kitchen making risotto. You're welcome. You're welcome for this. He was unhinged, his face red. The entire gala was watching now. Don't you get it? He spat, his voice cracking. It doesn't matter what dress you wear. You're still the same person, the woman who couldn't even keep her husband. You were a burden then, and you're just a glorified burden now, riding on his coattails. He jabbed his finger again, this time past Audrey, at the man who had just walked up, silent as a shadow. Elias Thorne. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet Audrey could hear the clink of an ice cube in a distant glass. Elias stood next to Audrey. He didn't look at Mark. He looked at the deputy mayor, the Chicago magnate, and the other investors who were watching his face, calm and analytical. "Mr. Davis," Elias said, his voice not loud but carrying in the stillness, "your assessment of character is noted." He then looked at Mark for the first time, his gaze flat and cold. "You looked at this woman and you saw a liability, a burden, as you so publicly and repeatedly state. You saw a cost to be cut, an expense to be discarded." He turned his gaze to Audrey, and in front of the most powerful people in New York his expression softened. "I look at Audrey Hale," he said, his voice resonating with absolute authority, "and I see the architect who just 30 minutes ago beat 2,000 of the world's best innovators to win the Ethelred Prize." The investors nodded. That was a fact. "I see the strategist," Elias continued, "who in her first 2 months as an executive assistant analyzed and rebuilt my executive team's logistical scheduling. A problem, I might add, that my $400 an hour consultants at McKinsey couldn't solve. A fix that saved my company $40 million in operational inefficiencies in a single quarter." A gasp went through the room. The deputy mayor's eyebrows shot up. This wasn't a pity case. This was a hidden genius. "I see the partner," Elias said, "that I am entrusting with the future of this city." He turned back to the stunned crowd. "Ethelred Dynamics, in partnership with the state of New York, is formally announcing the Hudson Yards Resurgence Project, a $5 billion contract to build the next generation of sustainable urban living. Ms. Hale will be leading it. Her design, her team, her vision." Mark's jaw had literally fallen open. His face was white as chalk. Elias Thorne looked at Mark one last time, his voice dropping to a deadly final whisper. "So, you are right in a way, Mr. Davis. It's all about what you see." He then looked at Audrey, and his voice was for her, but the whole world heard it. "You saw a burden. I see the woman I'd build the world for." Checkmate. The silence was broken by a sharp crack. Chloe Vanderbilt had slapped Mark Davis across the face. "You idiot!" she hissed, her voice vibrating with rage. She wasn't angry at the insult to Audrey. She was angry at the insult to her own portfolio. "You attached our family name to a failure." She wasn't talking about Audrey. She was talking about him. She turned on her heel and stormed off, leaving Mark alone, his face bright red with the handprint. Two of Elias's personal security team who had been on standby materialized. "Mr. Davis," Elias said, signaling them, "I believe you're at the wrong party." As the guards took Mark by each arm, he made one last pathetic lunge. "She'll be a burden to you too, Thorne. You'll see. She's a leech. She'll ruin you." But no one was listening. They were all swarming Audrey, a frenzy of congratulations and partnership offers. "Ms. Hale, my card. $5 billion, my God. We must have lunch. Ms. Hale." Elias held up a hand. The crowd paused. He gently took Audrey's elbow. "I believe my partner needs some air." He led her through the throng who parted for them as if they were royalty and out onto a quiet private balcony overlooking the city. The noise of the gala faded, replaced by the distant sound of city traffic. Audrey leaned against the railing, the cold night air hitting her face. She was shaking not from fear but from adrenaline. You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did," Elias said, standing beside her. He looked out at the skyline. His assessment was flawed. It required correction. Audrey laughed, a real shaky laugh. "That was quite a correction. The Hudson Yards Resurgence Project, $5 billion. Was that real?" Elias turned to her, a rare, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "The contracts are being drawn up tomorrow. I told you, Ms. Hale, I wanted that building built. I just didn't see the point in announcing it until the architect was available. You knew I would win," she said, realizing it. "I knew your design was the only one that mattered," he corrected. He looked at her, his eyes serious. "Mark Davis, He never understood value. He thought value was something you take. He thought people were assets or liabilities. He gestured to the city spreading out before them, a carpet of lights. You, he said, his voice quiet, are the foundation. 6 months later, the David H. Koch Theater felt like a distant memory. Audrey stood on a steel girder 50 stories above Manhattan. She wore a white hard hat and a safety harness, and the blueprints clutched in her hand were her own. The Phoenix Project was no longer just a render. It was rising. After the gala, Elias had been true to his word. He hadn't just given her the Hudson Yards contract. He had made her a partner in a new Ethelred division, Ethelred Habitats. She was no longer an assistant. She was a chief design officer. She looked down at the bustling work site. Her design, the Yakisugi treated glulam, the solar glass windows, it was all real. It was a home for thousands, a model for the future. The legal battle with Mark was over. Armed with Elias's legal team, the fraud case was a slam dunk. Mark Davis, it turned out, was also being investigated for defrauding the Vanderbilts. He had lost everything: his fictional company, his relationship, and his freedom. He was facing a prison sentence. Audrey's debt was expunged, ruled fraudulent, and she was awarded a significant sum in damages, which she promptly donated to a legal aid fund for domestic abuse survivors. She was financially free. She was creatively free. The site elevator dinged, and Elias Thorne stepped out onto the girder, joining her. He wasn't wearing a suit, but work boots and a hard hat that looked surprisingly natural on him. For months, their relationship had been intensely professional. They were partners in the truest sense. They argued over schematics, they celebrated engineering breakthroughs, and they worked 20-hour days side by side. The respect between them was absolute. But in the quiet moments, looking over blueprints at 2 a.m., something else had grown. A deep, unspoken affection. "The western facade is up," Audrey said, pointing. "The passive heating is already working better than we projected. We're 3 weeks ahead of schedule." "I know," Elias said. He wasn't looking at the building. He was looking at her. "It's magnificent, Audrey." "We built it," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "You designed it," he corrected. "You just let me help." He unrolled a different set of blueprints he was carrying. Audrey looked at them and her breath caught. It wasn't the Hudson Yards project. It was her napkin sketch, the community center. "The city council approved the zoning this morning," Elias said quietly. "The lot in Queens. It's ours. Your first solo Ethelred Habitats project. The funding is already secured." Audrey looked from the plans to his face. He had remembered. The sketch she made when she was a broken, invisible barista. He had taken her smallest, most desperate dream and made it real. "Elias," she whispered, "this is... why?" "Because you were right," he said, his voice low. "About the glulam, about the yakisugi, about architecture being about hope." He reached out not to touch her, but to gently tap the blueprint in her hand. "You're the architect of the future, Audrey Hale. I'm just the engineer who gets to help you build it." Audrey looked out over the city. Her city. She was no longer a burden. She was the foundation. "What's next?" Elias asked, standing beside her, their shoulders almost touching, partners in every way. Audrey Hale smiled, the wind whipping her hair. "We build." Audrey's story teaches us a powerful lesson. Your worth is never determined by the person who fails to see it. One man called her a burden, and it almost destroyed her. Another man called her the woman he would build the world for, and together they did. She was never the burden. She was always the architect, just waiting for the chance to build. What did you think of Audrey's incredible journey from rock bottom to the top of the skyline? Which twist was the most shocking? The devastating debt, or the public takedown at the gala? Let us know your favorite part in the comments below. If you were inspired by Audrey's story of resilience and finding her true worth, please like this video and share it with someone who might need a reminder that their napkin sketch could change the world. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss another real-life story of triumph and transformation. Thanks for listening.